This is the Detail Comics podcast, episode number 1. So I'm Stan from Detail Comics. I'm here with Blackpole, and we're just going to be chatting about all the different topics that we've got for this coming week. We've got a list of a few, but we'll probably go off on a few tangents here and there. So I just want to welcome everybody. This is going to be kind of a new thing for us. And Blackpole, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Blackpole. If you're on YouTube at all, you've probably seen me in some of the chat rooms or commenting on Stan's videos over here at Detail Comics. But yeah, I appreciate you taking some time out, Stan, so we can work on this new little venture we got going together.
No, absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I always appreciate good conversation when it comes to that kind of stuff. So as far as starting off everything with the format and whatnot, we're going to talk about like news real quick about comic books. And to be honest with you, I don't really follow a whole heck of a lot of news when it comes to books other than, say, new books that are coming out. I don't really want to get caught up in the drama and things like that. But I'm kind of curious as to whether there's something that you found out there.
Yeah, I've got a couple of pieces of news. I think one of the big ones, and I'm thinking you probably saw this, I was kind of disappointed. Originally, Frontier was going to drop this month. Then it got pushed to the beginning of December, and now Jonathan Hickman came out last week. He tweeted, quote, "We're running late enough to cause severe ordering problems," end quote, and it's going to be resolicited, so I'm guessing hopefully it shows up in the March solicitations now. So yeah, I was disappointed about that.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Actually, the guy at my local comic book shop, I have to give a shout out to Justin. Justin's my local comic book guy at Double Midnight Comics in Concord, New Hampshire, and he sent me a text message. Like, he sent me a message saying, "Oh man, did you hear? Frontier got shut down." I was like, "Oh no!" But it's like that's another thing that you don't get with digital comics. Digital comics, you don't have that guy. You don't have that person that you can just walk in and be like, "Oh, did you read this?" And they're talking about that. You get that conversation, that kind of lively feel to everything. And that's a really super important part of comic books to me, at least in that respect. Do you have that?
What he's doing with Black Monday Murders, I understand. He must have been putting a lot into that as well. But it's good to see that it's because they're running late, or the ordering was what they said caused the issue. So that's really good. So they must have been, way above what they were expecting anticipation-wise for order numbers. And if it does anything like Reborn did, where Reborn hit that like 18 on the charts, which I know we'll get into later. So that might be a good sign as to what's going to happen with Frontier. Maybe it's going to be a bigger hit than what they anticipated.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of really kind of cult classic love for Jonathan Hickman out there, especially when you look at like his resume. But we're actually going to talk about writers a little bit later on. We got a really cool idea that kind of showed up in the comments of one of my videos a couple days ago, and that's going to be a really interesting conversation. Was there anything else in the news or the world of news around comic books that really caught your eye?
I got two other just small pieces. The first was, and I know you probably saw this, the Unworthy Thor's changing artists. I was a little disappointed with that.
Well, that's that's funny, because I saw later that Bleeding Cool, I think, redacted that. They said that Copiel is going to stay on the book for 4 and 5, but there's going to be a guest artist for a section of issue 3. So that was really, because I saw that you guys talked about that on the other show, and I was just like, oh man, that really sucks. And then no less than a couple hours after that, I was just like, oh no, he's still on the book. So it's really weird how sometimes you can hear that news and sometimes you kind of miss it. Let me just see if I can verify that real quick. But that would have been a really huge thing, because Copiel's art is probably one of the bigger parts of that book.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, Stan, and maybe that's something in a future episode we should really talk about, is where to get your comic news, because CBR's got some issues, Newsarama has some issues, so you do see some of that where they redact, bring out a story and then they redact it right away, and I hate not being current, and I hate bringing out news that isn't correct, so I struggle sometimes on where to grab my good news from.
What's the last one for you?
I was just going to mention briefly, and it kind of jump into, I know we're going to end up talking solicitations, but just maybe we can shelve it until then. But the Daredevil, what he's calling Running with the Devil, Charles Soule has basically come out and said, hey, there going to be some key issues coming up. Soule said, quote, "I'd like to single out issue number 16 as a must-read," end quote. That's going to be in January. I believe 17 is also going to be in January, but 17 through 20 is going to be called Running with the Devil. And he said it's basically going to explain that Matt Murdock had his identity hidden or put back into secrecy on purpose, and he's going to let you know why he did it, and what he was hoping to accomplish. And by the end of issue 20, all your questions are going to be answered about how he got his identity back. So I'm super excited about that. I think it's going to be really cool, and I can't wait to see what he does with it.
And to be honest with you, I'm probably going to have to start picking up Daredevil much more consistently than I have been, because I've been almost not on the radar for that book at all. It's just really hasn't struck me. But the fact that you've got Matthew Rosenberg coming out, and he's going to be doing the Kingpin book, which is tying directly into Running with the Devil, and then you've got the Elektra book that's coming out as well, Bullseye, which is the mini that's going out with that too. So that's going to be a really big series for people that are kind of fans of that Daredevil universe to really hop into. And if 16 is kind of like the jumping on point as a must read, then definitely a recommendation to go grab that in January. That's no surprise.
Yeah, it sounds like all the writers now, they're like what you call the Daredevil universe, are basically reading each other's plot outlines, their scripts. They're looking for ways to organically interconnect these, and it's supposed to, eventually, with those other books, come off to a big peak at some point. Soul said that he had basically, when he went to Marvel with the idea, he was he had 2 years plotted out with some major points, and we're going to start getting into those. So there were some misses in the Daredevil run. Some of the Five Finger stuff in the beginning I didn't care for a whole lot. The Muse, who's their new villain right now, that's actually been pretty darn fun. I've actually enjoyed that quite a bit.
Cool, that's awesome. It's funny, planning out an event like years in advance. That's crazy. That's a really ridiculous idea. And anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, you can go check out my review of Civil War II, number 7, because that's probably my most negative review out of anything on my channel. Not that I'm proud of it. Yeah, not that I'm proud of it at all. I try to find the redeeming things and everything, and David Marquez's art is fantastic. And we'll just pretty much stop there. All right, so that really kind of touches on the news aspect, but what we kind of get caught up with when it comes to comic books is what's doing well, right? It's all about what kind of content is being, it's sold pretty well, good sales numbers. It's really something that you consider a strong seller, a strong comic book. Yeah, so Comicron is actual raw data. It's actually raw comic book sales, physical deliveries that go to your local comic book shop and get sold on shelves. So when you look at Comicron, then you dump into, say, like October of 2016, which is the most recent figures they have, you see that Big Trouble in Little China is number 1, which is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they put that little dagger next to it and explained what it was, because it really gives you the idea of how many issues did they really sell. Basically, it shows it sold about 421,000, and then there's a note that between 300 and 400,000 were in Loot Crate.
Yeah.
So at the high end, Big Trouble in Little China Escape from New York sold 21,000. Or I should say 121. Low end is 21,000.
Yeah, high end 121,000, low end 21,000, which is probably a little bit closer to the real number.
Yeah, I think so.
And Champions, even though Champions is a great book, I really enjoyed Champions issue number 1. I think it's a really strong, real opening salve for Marvel Now 2.0. That was also evidently included in some sort of scholastic reading thing to get kids into comic books. As a fun medium, so that might be a little bit more inflated as well.
Yeah, I heard 2 areas they put it in. One was like with lunch boxes, as they sold some lunch boxes. They had included in that. And I heard it was also going in the old Scholastic magazine, which we got as kids in school, that it would go into their book fairs at elementary schools and junior highs and stuff. So that number is inflated. I'm just taking a stab. I don't know what the true number is, but I still betting that might have finished in the top 10.
Well, as far as Champions, I think that Champions is still probably a 150K book. If you're talking about just like raw numbers, that puts it firmly in the top 5. Because if we look at anything beyond that, then you've got Doctor Strange and the Sorcerer Supreme, which is a number 1, and that was probably over-ordered because of the Doctor Strange movie that came out at the same time. Then for Marvel, you've got Civil War II, which is the major event that people are following along with, whether it's justified or not. Then you've got Darth Vader. Then you don't get into another superhero-based book. Clone Conspiracy is kind of an event, but a dedicated individual superhero book from Marvel until what? Jessica Jones?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 22.
And that's a number 1 too, and number 1s are always a little bit higher in sales than the 2 or 3 or 4.
But that also shows you how little interest there were in the Marvel Now 2.0 number 1s, because Jessica Jones is only 74,000, like 75,000. Infamous Iron Man, which is Victor Von Doom taking over the mantle of Iron Man. That book for an opening number 1, 73,000 copies.
Yeah. You said, one of their stalwarts and one of their flagships, the Amazing Spider-Man, every month is kind of at that same number 24.
Yeah.
It sits right around that area. But they're, looking at September's numbers, though, if I remember back correctly, I think they had Star Wars in the top 10, and then it was all the way to Spider-Man before their next one. I think DC had all but, out of the top 23, I think DC had all but 2 spots, and I think they were Walking Dead and Star Wars, and the other ones were all theirs. So it's good to see Marvel getting at least some more up there, even if they are number ones.
The question is, do you think that that's really based on Marvel putting out quality books, or the fact that DC Rebirth is kind of like losing its shine a little bit, and it's really touching on, people are no longer following along with certain titles anymore, and that's bringing down the overall sales numbers for DC? Still stellar, but not quite up at the original 150, 250, 300,000 kind of copy,
Well, I asked my local comic shop owner on Wednesday when I went and grabbed my books. I asked him, so, what are you seeing with DC right now? What are you seeing with Marvel? And he said DC, he's seen a pretty big drop off. He said, there's books that, I was ordering 10 to 15 copies. I don't live in a major city. He said there's, 10 to 15 copies are now down to 1, 2, or 3. Maybe even drop completely. I said, okay, well, you're seeing this decline. What about Marvel? And he said, Marvel's been basically holding steady. So I think some of the new shine is rubbing off with Rebirth. The big question going forward now, once we get past, the November, December, is January's numbers going to push that back up when they get into the new releases or the second wave of Rebirth stuff?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. What would you say are like the books that you kind of see the biggest drop off on as far as DC Rebirth?
It's funny because I actually looked at this. I'm somewhat of a numbers geek, so when I was going through this,
Me
I'm
too,
like,
it's
I got to
totally
take
fine.
a look at what's going on. So I'll give you what I found as some of the big ones. Trinity in September, on September 7th. I should say these are going to be, that was Trinity. I'm sorry, Trinity in September 7th. It was number 7 in September. In October, it had dropped to number 32, which was a 30,000 K less. So that's a pretty darn big jump. Suicide Squad 9 September to number 27 in October, 20,000 K.
Well, that's for one issue of Suicide Squad.
One of the issues,
the
yep.
second issue of Suicide Squad, number 5, that one dropped down to 63,000. That was 35th on the list. So
Yeah,
unlike Batman or Justice League, Batman's 5 and 6 on the list. Justice League is 12 and 13. That's like, okay, the first, issue number 4, and then from issue number 4 to issue number 5, you drop another 10 to 15 spots.
Exactly. Teen Titans took a pretty big hit. It went from number 11 to number 33 in October. That's another 20,000. Harley Quinn in September, it was at 16. It dropped to 37. There's 18,000. Supergirl, this one took a major hit. It was number 8 in September. 90,000 copies sold. In October, it was slashed in half. It came in at 58. Dropped 45,000 copies. And then some that I didn't expect. Like, I expected a lot of people to jump on Doom Patrol, but I expect them to stick with it, I think, a little longer.
Yeah.
Doom Patrol was 19 in September. It dropped all the way to 79. Again, this is another one that lost half, so you're talking 38,000 copies. So those 6 titles I just gave you is 171,000 less copies that they sold in October from those same titles.
That's really intense. And I mean, I'm looking down here in the bottom part, and that you've got really new titles like New Superman. You've got Death of Hawkman, which was introduces a new number 1. That's Mark Andreyko. I seen him on like Scree Junkies movie fights and stuff like that. So he wrote that. And then you've got other really good titles like Deathstroke. Deathstroke is at number 75 for issue 5. That's 39,000 copies. And that's like a really good book. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be like DC's version of The Vision, in terms of how its popularity is going to kind of wane, but it's still going to be a really good title, and it's going to be a really good story. But when you look at like Marvel's like, oh, who do we have down here? We've got Guardians of the Galaxy, we've got Spider-Gwen, we've got Deadpool in the works for money, we've got all these other books, Moon Knight, which is a really good book. That's, at 93. There's a lot of different stuff. As far as comparison-wise, it's clearly still top-tier stuff for DC versus where Marvel's at with their topics.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There were a couple that stood out to me. I was shocked, and I'm a big supporter of it. Most people, I don't think, read it. But it came in at number 71 was Great Lakes Avengers, 40,000. Now, you look at it, it sold more than Daredevil. It sold more than, as you mentioned, Moon Knight, Deathstroke, Cyborg. I'm hoping that Marvel sees that and goes, okay, we need to push this book a little forward, because they do have some newer titles coming out that are really good. I'm shocked. I mean, I think if I remember right, Power Man and Iron Fist is another one that was in like the 60s or something like that, and it's one of those that should be a lot better than what it is. The story's been great. They did a really good job with the Civil War tie-in, so that's another one. But you're right. I don't know if Marvel's going to be able to recoup anything going forward, but it's going to be interesting as DC, that, like you said, that new shininess syndrome wears off with it, and then going forward, what happens with the Justice League and all that stuff coming up now.
Yeah, it's if we're talking about Justice League, then we'd have to talk about what's coming out next month, which would be Justice League versus Suicide Squad. But we can kind of touch on that a little bit later. As far as where we're seeing kind of like towards the bottom, once you get past around 100, then you start talking about 30,000 copies. So you get past 130, you start talking about 20,000 copies or less. And, you've got like Earth 2 Society, that's at 16,000 copies. But you also start seeing other things down here, like Future Quest and Scooby Apocalypse and all these relaunched Hanna-Barbera titles, which aren't getting really any of the traction that I feel like they really wanted them to get when they launched them as part of DC Rebirth. And then I found Power Man and Iron Fist, 19,000 copies, 134.
Yeah, it's down to 134. I think it was in the mid 60s back in September. Yeah, and I mean, you look at some of what they've tried to make big names for Marvel. Silk. I mean, Silk's coming in at 135. It's really interesting to see what drops. And when you start to get down this low now, there's even like, Squirrel Girl's really low. But you do have to remember with certain things like Squirrel Girl, they don't sell a whole lot, but she smashes it out of the park when it comes to trades.
Oh, yeah.
They will not drop that book, even if it sells 8,000 copies, because she'll sell trades left and right. So they'll keep putting out the single issues because they know they'll make their money back there.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, it's like you're talking about Marvel books that were supposed to become like stalwarts that are matching up against Black Monday Murders, which is a Image title about the occult and finance, written by Jonathan Hickman, which is super dense and relatively expensive. So it's one of those things where you got to kind of weigh these things back and forth to really kind of get a good read on things. Sales figures aren't necessarily the end-all, be-all. And what I started looking at, like I mentioned before, is the Comixology pull list. So they do a most pulled for the week, and that gives you an impression as to what most people are going to be reading. So like this past week, it was Civil War 2. And then there was a few other ones that kind of went on that. And that's what I'm going to kind of be matching my expectations with, because it might say 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 people are pulling this, because digital comics, there might not necessarily be as much as physical comics, but it's still a good reference because those are people that are still passionate enough to pull it digitally.
Have you just started looking at those ones, Stan?
Oh yeah, I just started looking at it a few days ago. Like I'm probably within the last 2 weeks. I started looking at the Comixology pull list.
What I'm going to be interested to see is, as we, I'm going to start looking at that as well. I haven't focused on that a lot, but what'll be neat to see is month over month what happens. Like we can look at what the numbers really here easily. It's interesting to see like Civil War now that it's wrapping up. Are people just trying to end it so they can get on to the next thing? That's going to be an interesting thing to take a look at. I haven't looked at it a whole lot, but I'll give you something to check out.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that I'd recommend, because that way you can also kind of get an idea of what other people might have thought was the best things that came out in November. As we kind of blend away from where the sales figures were in October, we still got to take a look at the books that came out in November that we really appreciated. So, we've got about 3 weeks into it. This is going to be actually 4 weeks into it, right?
Yeah, this Wednesday will be our 5th Wednesday of the month coming up here.
I am so stoked on that because my wallet could really use the relief.
I know, and that's where I'm getting to with, we've talked about this in the past kind of off air as far as just the double shipping from DC and how it affects the art and the stories and that going forward. But yeah, it would be nice money-wise too. I would just like to use some of those, those twice monthly shipping book money to get into some other series as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
DC's been just taking everything they can get right now.
Oh yeah, they've been grabbing my wallet like with both hands. They're just like, if I was like back in the '90s, I'd have a chain on that. They would have cut that shit and they would have taken it away. It's like they've got all my money right now. Let's take a look at what you think. So the way that I broke mine into Marvel, DC, as well as Independence. As far as what's been going on this month from November 1st until now. How did you break yours up? Just in general, did you rank them from a top 10, or did you just kind of
I threw my top two. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8. So I've actually got 10. So I just took my 10 favorite books of November, put them together. I can throw them into a quick
You know what's
Marvel
funny?
versus DC.
I've got 10 as well.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that would technically be my top 10 so far this month. But I just broke them up by what I thought was really good from each publisher. So I did 4 from Marvel, 4 from DC, and then 2 independent titles. Because I'm not as independent, geared as some other people. But what I like, I know that I like.
Yeah, and I didn't do a overall top 10. What I normally do is I take the books for that week, and these are my top 5, and I'll grab the top 2 off of each one of those for the week. Mm-hmm. And then there's some, out of those, there's some really good standouts. But normally, the top 1 or the top 2 are usually going to be my top 10 for the month anyways.
Oh, cool, yeah. So why don't you lead it off? What's one book of yours?
I'll start with DC, and I had Wonder Woman number 9 on there. And I know that'll probably roll into one of yours because I've watched a video over here with you recently. Number 9 was just, and the thing that I remember most about number 9 isn't the story as much as the artwork. There are just some incredibly gorgeous scenes in that one. That's the one with the sunset scene.
Yep.
I think 30 years from now, you're going to be able to ask me about the sunset scene in Wonder Woman, and I'm going to be able to remember it, and it's going to stick in my head. The detail, the coloring. He does the coloring that he did with the sun setting that you can only capture in that last hour of sunset is just beautiful. And I don't know how they can capture it coloring-wise because it's one of those things where normally people do not do a good job with it. That was one of my DC picks, so I thought Wonder Woman 9 was outstanding.
Oh, yeah, no, so on the same vein, Wonder Woman number 11 was easily one of my most favorite books out of all of November. And it's really easy to see why that would be a really strong book because it's such a revelation piece for Wonder Woman and her whole backstory. Because I'm curious to see where Greg Rucka goes with this because he just concluded the Lies storyline, so that's a pretty big finale for that overall scope, and it kind of pushes everything forward into Wonder Woman's current continuity. But what it does is it hits the reset button or the delete key or gives him free reign to basically say, no, this didn't really happen, but this did happen, but this didn't really happen, but this did happen. And he kind of explain those things away as he moves forward. So he can take all the things that he likes and kind of get rid of all the things that he doesn't. So I find that that's not necessarily the most beautiful of books. It was still pretty cool. They didn't have the parallel of the sunset scene, which is probably one of the more stunning pieces that they had in the Wonder Woman story arc so far. But as far as the sheer gravity that it would bring to her story, I found it was just unparalleled.
And this is where I think we can go off on a tangent, just because it's not an angry tangent by any means, but I read it on Thursday, today is Saturday. I still haven't processed it yet. I mean, I know the story. I still don't know how I feel yet. Yeah. I like the story a lot, but the thing is it a good way to do it where you can just erase all of that continuity beforehand from Paradise Island? But the other part to think about, and I've seen some people complaining about it online with this whole, everything I read in New 52 is just gone. It didn't happen. I just wasted all my time. Well, we're only a smidgen into what Rucka's doing. He could be on this run for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, putting out a Wonder Woman title. And who knows what he's going to do with this. Just because they put it down now doesn't mean that 6 months from now we find out that 95% of the stuff happened. And at this point she was transported to somewhere different. Or somebody had stolen her memory. Or, obviously it's comics, so they can write it any way they want. But so it's an interesting thing because I'm on the one hand, I hate the fact that you can just erase continuity that easily. On the other, I'm really intrigued to see what he's going to do, and you can't judge it until Rucka finishes his runs. And you look at the great runs, and it's a complete run. You look at Kevin Smith on Green Arrow or Lemire on Green Arrow, and you got to take it into completion, and that's why it's so good. So we're just scratching the surface where Rucka's at right now.
Oh yeah, no, this is not the finish line for Brian Azzarello's run in the New 52 or anything like that. This is the starting line for where Greg Rucka is going to push Wonder Woman forward, and that's why I really appreciated it. It's not about wiping out everything that's happened on Paradise Island. It's not about saying that Wonder Woman's never been home, so those things didn't really occur to her, because they're still in her memory. They're still in her mind. And that means that they have to come from someplace. Either somebody put those memories into her, or she experienced them in a different manner. So that's the interesting thing, how it's going to kind of twist those aspects and make it work into that story. And that's what I'm really, really stoked on.
Yeah, and this could be part of the bigger tie-in to Rebirth as a whole, with what's going on with the stolen memories and stuff like that, which I really hope it is, because in my opinion, out of all the Rebirth titles, consistent issue to issue in both story and art, Wonder Woman's probably been my top overall title, which I don't think I would have said going into it if I had a prediction. I don't think I would have even mentioned Wonder Woman as one of those titles, but I feel like, just every issue's been a real solid issue, if not finishing in my top 3 for that week.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's something that I didn't really anticipate liking as much as I do, but it's one of those ones where I buy every single issue because I know that I'm going to get something good. What's another one that you got?
So another one of mine was Batman number 10.
Batman number 10.
Yep. Because Batman number 9 was October, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Batman number 10, again, it was, some people had some issues with it because all Batman said the whole time was, I'm going to break Bane's back. I'm going to break Bane's back.
In a really creepy way, yeah.
Yeah. I loved the Catwoman letter. I was so hooked on that. And what it was for me was King put in my head Catwoman sitting at a desk with a old oil lamp, an old piece of parchment paper, and a pen, and I could see the scenes cutting back and forth in my head between Batman's action and a scene of her writing this letter, and hearing her narrate it while you saw her hand writing it like a movie scene. And it was just so expertly written without having to put her actually in the book. I was just in love with it. I was just so enthralled by it.
No, I totally agree with that. That is such a Tom King thing to do, because if you've read The Vision, or if you've read like Omega Men, or if you read Sheriff of Babylon, he has this kind of storytelling element that he likes to pull out, which is telling a story on top of another story. So he gives direction to the artist to give them a visual style, a visual story to tell, and then he writes something completely different over the top of it, so that way you kind of have that duality of the story. And he kind of accents those different pieces with what's going on in the overt text, but it doesn't make sense until you look at it from both sides, and you're just like, oh, okay, so Batman's crawling out of this cell that Bane was held in as a child, and Selina's talking about how she killed everybody, and it's just like the scene's all red, so the art matches up with the story, even though it's two separate topics. So I thought that was really cool. It didn't quite make it into my top 10 because I had to make room for Superman 11.
That's I couldn't argue with that at all. I'd have no problems with that. I actually prefer Batman number 9 just a little bit over Batman number 10, but again, 9 was the month before, and I still love Batman, but you can't argue with Superman number 10.
Just like I would have preferred Superman number 10 over Superman number 11 because that was the beginning of the In the Name of the Father arc, but I just thought that it was a really stellar way to introduce the relationship between John and Damian Wayne, and the storytelling gives this kind of like parental guidance aspect. It's just like, okay, so we're going to put our kids in this situation, but they're never really in serious danger, but they are going to feel like they need to have this kind of success. And there were some really cool bonding moments between the two kids. Like I really liked it when they were trying to get off the train and Goliath kind of rescues him and they treat him like a puppy dog. It just makes me want like a Goliath for my own, like a little miniature one or like a plush, something like that. So it's just like, I want a puppy Goliath. That would be fantastic. And then there's the scene where they're just kind of like the yin and yang sleeping on top of Goliath as they fly back over the ocean. And I thought that was a really great bonding moment. And that just gives me a really good indication of where Tomasi's going to go with Super Sons when it comes out. So that's going to come out in February, and I'm really excited just based on that issue alone.
Yeah, and that's one too. You not only have that bonding, you had the bonding at the end between Bruce and Clark. And that was really neat because they've been at each other's throats basically. And it was neat to see, and I've seen that in real life. I used to coach baseball, Babe Ruth, so you're talking 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. And you'd see parents that normally didn't get along, and it was like that scene in my head where, you've got those two at the end of the night basically watching their sons talking about, well, maybe we didn't raise such bad kids, or we're going to figure out how we're going to raise them. There's not so much in life to worry about. And so you saw that bonding as well, which was a nice little side piece.
I can only hope that they continue to carry that on in other books, because that was one of the real things that I was really frustrated with Justice League, was the fact that they were just like, everybody's kind of got to be tense, and they got to be at each other's throats, and Batman doesn't trust Clark, and he gets pissed at that. And it's just like, no. They should, in Trinity, they're having dinner, so they're going to be perfectly fine. And then in Superman, they're having hot cocoa. So it's like, Justice League is the only thing where they're still kind of like tense towards each other. You better get that shit out of there. I'm not really up on that. So if we're going to go away from like DC just for a moment, I'm going to have to touch on one book from Marvel that I really was anticipating and that I really enjoyed, and that's Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows #1. that was a love note to all Spider-Man fans that were hoping for a Spider-Man from before One More Day, because that's exactly what it is. They got a classic Spider-Man writer in Jerry Conway. You know, he wrote some of the pinnacle issues for the early Spider-Man. He's Death of Gwen Stacy and all that kind of stuff. So he knows his Spider-Man continuity. He introduced new characters in like the Spectacular Spider-Man and Web of Spider-Man like Tombstone, and he's got a really good history. And it's not like he was just lost in the ages, you know, because he's putting out Carnage right now, which is a really good horror kind of suspense book, and I really like that one too. So this, he tells great stories, good jokes, and Ryan Stegman's art is the unsung hero of the whole thing. I know that in the comments we kind of started dogging on its length because it felt short because I wanted more, and they could have done away with probably one of those kind of like secondary pieces of the issue, and that the conclusion was a little bit rough. You know, it was a little quick. It was kind of forced, and you're like, why the hell is Annie there? How the hell did the Mole Man show up, and all that kind of stuff. But overall, I found very little fault with it, but that's probably like a passion piece of my own. So what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I enjoyed it. I know from everybody I talked to who loves Spider-Man, they were so happy to see this Spider-Man back. They were so happy to see the writing back. I love some of the scenes. I love the scenes where Peter's in the kitchen cooking breakfast, and you got that whole thing going on. He flips the pancake, and she's diving over the table with the plate. That stuff to me was awesome. I was one of them that I wish they would have got rid of one of the backstories and moved it to just another issue. It seems like it's something that they could have put somewhere else. Somebody on your comments had posted, it was kind of the cliffhanger that the end was what you would expect. And I didn't really, I hadn't thought about it at there. I'm like, yeah, that is true. It is kind of what we thought with their daughter getting basically captured, and now we've got to go and find out what's going to happen next. It was a little bit scripted that way. I give 2 thumbs up to the art. It was gorgeous. It stopped me a couple times in my track, especially when they were in their suits. I just loved it. So it's definitely one that I'm going to be pulling for a while. I don't see him going anywhere with this book.
Cool. Did you have any books from Marvel?
Yeah, I actually did. Champions #2.
Champions #2.
I love this book. We've been fighting. JT and I have been fighting back and forth over Teen Titans or Champions. And Champions, in my opinion, wins hands down. Again, just my opinion. But I was sold from the opening page. You open up the cover, and there's all these kebabs stuck in a fire, and there's one that's huge. And there's Hulk with these, brontosaurus-sized pieces of meat on his skewer. There's so much good stuff in Champions. I mean, the storytelling was great. You get the part where Viv mentions she has Wi-Fi, and the next scene is all the kids sitting around the fire with their phones, not talking to each other, all paying attention to their phones. It was just, it was so well done. Wade has an individual voice for each one of those characters, which I really love. He's developing what I want out of these characters. This is what I want out of the Champions. And he's trying to slowly bring them together as a team. And I really like where he's going with this. I'm not going to give away a whole lot of spoilers, but that was my #1 pick that week. And it's probably in my top 3 for the whole month right now. It was that good.
It's really funny because if you compare and contrast Champions #2 and just Champions in general versus like Avengers, Champions is so much better a book than Avengers is, and I was not really expecting that at all. I thought that Wade was going to put like all his real effort into the Avengers book, and I found that his portrayal of Peter Parker was a little bit lackluster, and then overall everything would it felt far too familiar and far too much the same for the previous book. But Champions is like a fresh take on young individual superheroes, and I mean the fact that Viv's password is "even an android can cry." I was just like, throwback. That's pretty stellar. And then, yeah, there's this awkward tension that kind of happens because she's an android, and then ultimately that's going to be explained evidently in issue #4. There's a lot of real good groundwork that's being laid for this, and I think that it's easily the strongest Marvel Now title so far, as far as like giving a good feel as to where Marvel Now 2.0 is going to be going. I really like the way that is. It just barely missed out on the ones that I picked from Marvel, because I've got like 3 other #1s that kind of take it just a little bit over a #2, even though it's a super strong book. Super strong.
Yeah, it's one of those where, ending at #1, like you said, he writes the young crowd really well. That the end of Champions 1 is #champions all over the place. I was sold when he did that. It was just a great way to end that first issue. Then he got into this one. I'm sold on it because he makes relatable characters. A lot of us, and we're well out of our childhood years, but if you're a child, you're going to like this because you went to Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or something and can relate to what they're going through. And a lot of us have had those experiences in the past, and Wade has a way of connecting those relationships to you on a personal level, and that's what sells it for me.
Oh yeah, it's even though we might be well out of our teens, it's refreshing. That's the thing, is it feels kind of effervescent. It's got this really cool minty fresh kind of feel, and it makes me feel a bit younger. It makes me like, oh, I want to go on a camping trip with my teenage friends and have all these awkward kind of things happen, and some really great humor moments. It's just like, so how high can you jump? And then all of a sudden, the Hulk just takes off like a rocket, and then she's just like, finally he's gone. The odor of body spray has left the area, and man, there was just really key jokes, really good sense of humor, and then the art style of Ramos. I'm always a big fan of Humberto Ramos, so that is just another really stellar piece for me. I'm gonna pick an independent title.
For you, Mark. Oh, okay.
I'm gonna pick an independent title that I know that you're gonna love, and that's gonna be Black Hammer.
Oh.
Yeah, so
I will say that's on my list.
Yeah, so Black Hammer number 5. I just like Black Hammer in general, and Black Hammer number 5 continues a really good tradition of Jeff Lemire dissecting the superhero genre. So every single issue, apart from issue number 1, every single issue has been a really good tale of every individual character, what their backstory is, and how it relates to the current situation that they're in. For those people that aren't familiar with Black Hammer, it's about a group of superheroes that are fighting off this villainous enemy, and then ultimately there's one character, Black Hammer, that saves the day, but these other characters are banished into this alternate pocket dimension, it seems. So they're sending out probes. They can't get past the edge of town, so they're there, and they've been locked there for quite a while, and they've got to fit in with all these individual people. And this, Colonel Weird, his story is like one of the most depressing stories about a character that I have read in a long time. And it's odd because for him, time doesn't matter. In the Parazone, he just floats about, and he has no control really over where he goes. He just kind of goes into individual aspects every once in a while, and he goes in and out of this, and he never knows when he is, where he is, and how those things are going to impact that kind of stuff. So he's living his life in all of time, but not. And I thought that was really crazy. And then there was this one moment where he's sitting on the porch with Abe, and he's like, you're right, this is going to be the nicest sunset that I ever see. Yeah. And I was just like, let alone with the love of his life kind of thing, and her still kind of floating around in there. Oh, man, that was just like, that sucks.
Yeah, Black Hammer number 5 is on my list. It has been every month. It's been one of my top books. It usually is in my top 1 or 2 spot for the week. As you mentioned, it's part of the emotional connection. Lemire, every issue has that. Every issue you feel emotionally connected to each one of these characters. When even in this one, when you see Gale, and she's she's crying, she's depressed, she wants to go back home, and she wants Colonel Weir to take her with, take me with you. And there's some cool scenes where she's in there as a brooding youngster listening to The Cure and The Clash, and some of that stuff that Lemire puts in there I thought was outstanding. But every issue so far, all 5 of them have been a hit. It's one of those where if you're not getting Black Hammer, you should be. Go pick up the trade when it comes out. I know they're going to have the annual's going to be coming out.
That's next month. Yeah, that's December.
Yeah, the annual's next month, and then I think 6 is in January, and then they're going to take February off. I didn't see it. I know I'm jumping ahead just a little bit. I didn't see it in the Feb solicitations for Dark Hammer or for Dark Horse. So I messaged Lemire, and he said, no, we're just taking one off. And I was like, whew, I don't know if I could take like a 3 or 4 month break from it. It's the book that I want to read every month right away. I did hear a podcast with Lemire. He said basically he's already got the first 20 scripts written, and now he's going back. He said originally it was planned to be 25 issues or so, but he's loving this world. He's loving what he's doing. He could see it being a longer run, which I'm so happy about. This one, he just connects every single character to you on an emotional level, and it's great storytelling and perfect art. I'm really glad that they brought Dean Ormston on to do the art. I like Lemire's art, but Ormston's fits perfectly for this book.
Well, and that's funny because like Ormston's art is odd. Like by definition, it is a very odd kind of take, but it really pulls out some of those weird aspects of the individual characters. Like his portrayal of Barbalian is really cool. the daughter witch that we haven't really got to know that much. The whole character design, the Parazone. I mean, I was just blown away with how good that individual art can be, while it can still feel very outside the norm, and it definitely looks very outside the norm. It might be a little polarizing for some folks, but it complements the story really well, and that's the key to art.
And that's the other part with that art, the art and the story, the emotion. The art conveys the emotion that Lemire's putting out there, and they just blend so well together. And as you mentioned, we haven't dove into the witch at all. I think Lemire said 6, 7, and 8 are maybe going to dive into her, and then it's going to be Blackhammer's daughter is going to play a big role eventually going forward, so she's going to be a key player. But it sounds like once we get into the double-digit issues, we're going to start looking at some of the meta commentary on comics in general. And so this is his stance at some place like Dark Horse, that he can't do stuff like at Marvel. He's not going to be able to kind of take apart the comic industry, and he's going to do a little bit in that. So I can't wait to see what he's got planned for this.
And so I'm not going to lie, that makes me really want to talk about the next topic that we've got, which is going to be the Writer Showdown. So I'm just going to run through like the other ones that I was really happy with. I was really happy with Doom Patrol number 3.
That's on my list.
Yeah, I was really happy with Cape Carson number 2. So that means that I had 2 for this month from Young Animal, because I thought that Cape Carson number 2 was a much stronger issue compared to the first one. For Independence, I've got Black Monday Murders number 4, because Jonathan Hickman writes really, really good books. Despite the fact that it's a very unique kind of story, it's definitely something I really like. I really liked Invincible Iron Man number 1. I thought it was a really good introduction issue. We had like little spats of Riri Williams from there, but I really liked the portrayal that Brian Michael Bendis put out there. Everything felt more organic compared to, say, like his overarching event books. His individual books are always very personal, and I like the way that those are told. And then I've got Ultimates number 1 and Thanos number 1. And Ultimates number 1 is because I love cosmic stuff, and it's a journey back into the cosmic stuff. And Thanos is more cosmic stuff, and that was more Lemire, and that was Deodato, and that team is just gonna crush that book.
He's just setting the groundwork right now. Lemire is on that one, and I love the artwork. I love the real slick looking characters, and then the dotted background that he did. There's such a contrast in that artwork. It was gorgeous. I can't wait to see where they're going with that.
Oh yeah, old halftone style. It really kind of harkened back to the old day of comic books. Yeah. So what else do you have on yours?
I will join you in Doom Patrol 3 and Black Monday Murders 4. The other ones that I had where AD After Death just came out. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about emotional, melancholy story, and then how can you not love the artwork in an oversized book like that? For $6, whatever, 60-some pages, large print art, unbelievable. I was big into literary fiction. I still am. That's Scott Snyder doing literary fiction. It's not Scott Snyder doing comics.
Well, that's exactly what I compared it to. When I don't know how to feel about it, because I feel like it's not a comic book. It's more of like an illustrated short story. Yeah. So that's one of the things that I'm like, I haven't done a review. I haven't done an irate review because I'm still so torn on it, and I want to read it for like a second time and a third time. I might actually do it for Comics and Coffee tomorrow. Like, there you go. Where I'll just be like, have a discussion, just like give out my thoughts on it instead of like a standard irate review, because that doesn't feel like it does it justice.
He's dealing with larger overall issues that everybody's going to deal with, and he does them in a way that connects you to them. It's the first chapter, in my opinion, of a great literary piece of work. And like you said, it's not a comic book per se, and I would completely agree with that. But it hit home. I love literary fiction, so it hit home with me. I had Trinity number 3 on my list. That was hands down my favorite issue of Trinity so far they put out. It was so good. If you haven't read it, go see it. It's still go read it. Francis Manapul doesn't do the art, but the gentleman who does do the art,
Clay Mann.
Clay Mann, thank you. He was obviously taking lessons from Francis Manapul because it's laid out just like Francis Manapul's. The panels are laid out kind of the same way. The art is done the same way. I don't think if you would have taken his name off there, I don't think there would have been much. I don't think many people would have known the difference between the two.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah, the story was phenomenal as well. 2 other ones. One from Valiant, another Jeff Lemire title. I'm a huge Jeff Lemire fan.
It's a Bloodshot book.
You got it. Bloodshot USA number 1. I am a huge Lemire fan. I like Valiant Universe. This one's got all your favorite characters in the Valiant Universe in it. Ninjak shows up. I like Ninjak. That was a lot of fun. It was just action. And then Power Man and Iron Fist number 10. Again, I talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about the numbers. That series has been so much fun. And I love comedy, and that's why I like the Great Lakes Adventures. I like some comedy and some humor in my comics. And in this one, at one point, they meet with all of the Avengers and basically say, this is, Power Man and Iron Fist say, this is basically what we're going to do going forward. And then they get done, and Iron Fist looks at Power Man and he goes, what's with Spidey? Isn't he like 12? I mean, there's just all this humor in there. And somebody's asking, one of the Avengers is asking, Iron Fist, what the hell's this fiddle faddle stuff that Power Man keeps talking about? Well, he can't swear at home, so he uses these, things like fiddle faddle, and he's got to try to explain it. Just a ride. But those are my top 10.
Cool. No, all very solid picks, very good picks. I do notice a theme that's kind of emerging as far as what we've got going on here, because we've got Jeff Lemire. A lot of his books make it into our top picks. We've got Jonathan Hickman, both on our top picks. And then you've also got a book that we didn't necessarily talk about, but another writer that's got a lot of strong points is Rick Remender. And then another book that we didn't talk about, which is Reborn, which was one of the most popular books over the last couple weeks, sold over 70,000 copies for an independent book, Reborn, and that's Mark Millar. So there was a comment that was posted on one of the videos, and that was, right now, who would you take? If you were talking about a writer, who would you take? Would you take Jeff Lemire? Would you take Jonathan Hickman? Would you take Mark Millar? Or would you take Rick Remender? And that's interesting because it seems like right now, after you've heard us talk, it's a really obvious choice, right? It's just like, oh yeah, Jeff Lemire, you're good, hands down. It's like, well, I don't necessarily know, because you got to look at the individual strong points of each writer. So if we're talking about Jeff Lemire is doing a lot of different books. He's got Descender from Image. He's got this book that he's doing the art with. Scott Snyder for AD After Death. But then he's also got Black Hammer, which is coming out from Dark Horse. He's doing Old Man Logan. He's doing Moon Knight. He's probably one of the hardest working writers in all of comic books. So he's got a lot of versatility. You look at Mark Millar. Mark Millar has a really good stable. He did Wanted, which became a movie. He did Kick-Ass, which became a movie and a sequel. He did The Secret Service, which became Kingsman and the Secret Service, which is another movie. He's doing Reborn, which is probably going to be a movie. He's more of like your commercial kind of director / writer. And I've heard that options were extended for Jupiter's Legacy, as well as possibly Empress, which is a book that just finished up. So he's got a lot of strong points when it comes to doing commercial kind of writing. And then you got Remender. I think Remender got Deadly Class optioned. He's got Black Science. He's got Seven to Eternity. He did the X-Force run. He's got a lot of different Marvel history that goes along with that. And then... So yeah, Hickman's Jonathan Hickman. Hickman did probably the most substantial run in the Fantastic Four's history, as well as Avengers, New Avengers. He did Nightly News. He's got so much stuff going on. So let's make the case for each writer and why they would possibly be the best.
I've got, one of the things that we're going to have a little bit difference on, because I know you've read a lot more of their Marvel publications or their DC individual issues than I have. I've run a lot of their independent works more than their runs on the big two, but I still feel like I can bring a little bit of what I like about each one. Obviously, I've made no qualms about it. Lemire's pretty much my favorite author right now, because of his diversity, because he's writing these crazy, he's in the Valiant universe, he's in the Marvel universe, he's doing Black Hammer for Dark Horse, he's just all across the board writing all these different kinds of stories. I don't know how he keeps them all straight in his head. He's got March is Moon City, or there's Royal City, I think he's got coming out, so he's got another title coming out in March on top of it. And he's just got a way of taking what's best about the book and running with it. So with Black Hammer, it's the emotional attachment to the individual characters. When he gets into Bloodshot, it's about the action that should be there. It's not a great emotional connection to the characters. It's all about the action and the plotting and what he's going to blow up and destroy. And I think he just does a great job across the board with it.
But yeah, no, you make a really good case for Jeff Lemire. And then if you talk about like Moon Knight has got a really good psychological aspect. He's breaking up the individual kind of personalities that Mark Spector's got. He's doing Old Man Logan, which is probably one of the best Marvel books after All New, All Different. And that's something that you'll hear from a lot of different channels across YouTube, is that he is just doing a stellar piece on that particular book. And then Sorrentino's art is really good on that one as well. His Descender run is fantastic. Descender, besides Dustin Nguyen's watercolor art, which is really kind of a soft contrast to like the cold darkness of space and some of the inherent violence that goes along with that, he tells those really good emotional stories that you get out of Black Hammer in there as well. It's like this robot has a personality, and you feel the robots kind of like struggle when it gets towards the end of this very personal tale in one of those issues. And I was just like, oh my God, this is stunning. But then I kind of go back to Jonathan Hickman, and I've read a lot of Jonathan. I read all of the Fantastic Four. I've got like all the hardcovers. I got the omnibuses for Hickman's run on the Fantastic Four, and then I picked up Avengers, and then New Avengers, and then Time Runs Out, and Secret Wars. And the thing about Jonathan Hickman isn't necessarily the strongest emotional writer, but he has this way with detail. He has this way with structuring a story that is supreme. I think that if you're talking about somebody that's going to carry on a run for years at a time and has a plan, an overarching story, you want to feel connected. You might not necessarily get it out of issue 10, issue 20, but when you look at issue 1 through 75, you're like, oh my God, this was amazing. I can't believe he planted those seeds so far back. And it's just a real mastercraft kind of work, So I've heard stories about how Hickman writes his stories, and he starts with a conclusion, then he goes to the beginning, and then he works his way backwards and kind of plots how the twists and turns are going to work and where those little Easter eggs are going to kind of be laid, because he knows that this event is going to lead into this final event, so he plants the seeds for that event like in the third issue, and then it picks up and it makes a lot of sense once those things all kind of meld together. And I just appreciate that kind of craftsmanship that goes into a story, because there are a lot of things I'm sure that Lemire has a really good sense of where everything's going, but the variances are much more fluid. And while Hickman, you can see it in Black Monday Murders. Black Monday Murders has a plan the entire way through. Everything about it is structured and precision, and it's sophisticated, and there's a whole lot of depth. As soon as you jump into it, it has just got so much depth that you get scared that it's just like you're going to get lost in the minutia. And I really appreciate that aspect of him.
Did he do, now let me ask you this, with those Marvel runs that he did, do you see the similarities between that and like some of the stuff he does with Black Monday Murders about how in-depth the story is?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so when you're talking about like Hickman's run on the Fantastic Four, Hickman's run starts off with the Fantastic Four as still the Fantastic Four, and then he sets up the events of Secret Wars at Franklin Richards' birthday, which is like his 10th or 12th issue into the entire series. So they invite like Spider-Man over and everything like that, and it's a really fun family issue. It's the first time I'd really read anybody having a birthday in the Marvel Universe and like having a year associated with their age, and a super faux pas for comic books. You never make your character's age. But at the end of this birthday party, it's him and his sister Valeria, and then all of a sudden this random dude shows up, totally like powers Franklin Richards down, and then talks to Valeria, and this is behind this force field that Sue and Reed can't get through. And then all of a sudden they like leave, and you find out later that was the older version of Franklin Richards, and he turned his powers back on. So Franklin Richards can basically alter the universe. He's got reality warping power, so he basically turned himself back on so that way he could use his own power, like he could take it from his younger self to help kind of facilitate this struggle at the end before the incursions and all that kind of stuff started to bring in Secret Wars. So
that's cool.
So it was just like that was that far forward, and I was just blown away when I kind of got to that aspect. It was amazing. I have so much respect for how he told that story and how he tells the story from then on. I love it. It's great.
It's one of those things, like I said, I have a lot of more experience with his image work and some of the other stuff. So it's neat to hear that, and you've actually got me kind of geeked up to go out there and pick up some of his Marvel runs and take a look into it, because I do love what he's doing with Black Monday Murders. I do love what I've read from East of West. I thought that was great. And I know like two of the things that tie me together with Hickman and Remender. We can I was going to jump a little bit over the Remender side, and we can discuss Hickman. So the two things I really like about them is they both have these terrible characters that have faults that you love. And I love that part. They've got some guys that they write people that are you might not be as emotionally attached to him, in my opinion, as Lemire's what he's doing, but you love these characters, and they've got all these downfalls and these faults, whether they're heavy drinkers or in East of West, you've got Death, and you feel sad when he's in love with somebody who doesn't love you back, and he connects you. You can feel the pain when he is rejected, when Death gets rejected. There's some really complex storytelling with Hickman. And it's both Hickman and Remender both constantly keep you engaged. They give you a secret and they reveal a new mystery. They give you a secret and they reveal a new mystery, and they keep building on that. So it's really a different style of writing than what Lemire's doing. But Hickman and Remender, I feel like they share some traits that I really enjoy.
Oh, yeah, no, I can totally agree with that. And what's funny is that if you start looking at something like, say, Seven to Eternity, because I don't really have a whole lot of experience with Remender outside of, like, a few of his Marvel books, and then, like, a little bit of Tokyo Ghost, and now Seven to Eternity. But he is, like, a slightly different version of the way Hickman tells his stories, but he throws a little bit more edge onto all of his stuff. It always feels just a little bit newer, a little bit more like I want to say like grunge in the 90s, like when it came out, like when Nirvana, and it just felt different than everything else that was coming out around it. And that's what I get from Rick Remender compared to, say, something like Hickman. Hickman's stories are rooted in a lot of technical aspects. They're rooted in a lot of different, reality-based things that he makes fantastical. Whereas Remender just goes straight into whatever the hell he wants to do, and then he does it really well. And it's always complemented by very good art. So he knows how to pick really good artists.
And that's where Black Science was for me. You jump in right from the beginning. It's action from the first page. You just start going, and then you see all these kind of evil people around him, and all of a sudden you find out, well, your protagonist is cheating on his wife, and he's got 2 kids, and he's doing all these bad things on the side, and you're like, who is good and who is bad? And they blur that line. And Hickman does the same thing in East of West. You've got Death, but you're blurring the lines of what's good and what's bad. They're 2 different storytelling, and I like the way that Hickman's really elaborate with what he does and how he develops his stories. Remender's just a lot of fun, straightforward action with just these really complex characters that he brings out. Both of those two, I mean, I'd make an argument for either one as well. I mean, Lemire's my favorite, but either one of those, I'd have no problem saying, yeah, they're one of my tops.
And so I feel like basically at this point in time, we're just going to throw Mark Millar on the bus, under the bus. Is that the case with this? Because
for me personally, I haven't read a ton of Millar stuff. I like a lot more detail than the few things that I have read from Millar. Reborn, I'm not quite as big on as everybody else is at this point. I enjoy it. I'm not as big into the fantasy side of comics as some of the other stuff, but I feel like the storytelling is what drives a good comic. You need both, I think, art and storytelling, but the storytelling has to be there, and I just feel like those 3 are above Millar at this point.
Well, so that's really interesting because, Millar did Civil War, the original Civil War, which was just this grand, epic scope of, registration. It was politically driven. It was like a really great story for that point in time about superhero registration, and that's regarded as one of the stronger crossover events. That's what unfortunately made Marvel what it is today. The idea that event drove the success of Marvel for such a long period of time, and it impacted so many things. I mean, they just made a movie about the premise of Civil War. And that was like one of the strongest events that they've ever done. And then you've also got Old Man Logan, which is another one that's being made into a movie. And that was probably one of the strongest Wolverine stories ever told. It was outside the realm of continuity, but the idea that the supervillains took over and that it was Mysterio that was like the most badass out of them all, got Wolverine to take care of all his dirty work for him. It was a really fresh take on a Wolverine character that you haven't really seen since like maybe Chris Claremont, who was working with Frank Miller back in the day, and it stands up as one of the best Wolverine stories. So you've got to think, like, at one point in time, Mark Millar was a really top-tier, stellar writer. And he wrote very good comic books, he wrote very good stories, and now you've got to kind of wonder, does Mark Millar write stories for comic books, or does he write stories to become movies or TV shows?
And that's part of it. I completely agree with you there. I'm thinking about their current writing to their last 18 months, 24 months of writing, and who I'm really in love with right now as far as writers go. And that was going to be actually my question to you, Stan, was since you've read a little bit more of the Marvel stuff that Millar's wrote, is he now writing for the screen and putting it in a comic book form because that's what he knows better? Or do you think he's still kind of writing a true comic book and just saying, I hope it'll get adapted the way it is?
So one of the things that I probably refer to Millar the most is writing cinematically. And that really kind of, it basically tips my hand as to how I interpret Mark Millar. Because I read it like it's a screenplay. I read it like it's a script. I read it like you're following a 3-act structure, and then you're going to have like your main twist that's going to happen in the second issue. Then you're going to have your like next in the third act, you're going to have the third act reveal, and then ultimately the conflict, and then the end of the hero's journey, and then you kind of dip down into the next one. And I found that happened in Empress. So Empress was 7 issues. That was him and Stuart Immonen, and it was about Emporia, who's the Empress of the Quadrant or the Galaxy or whatever the hell they were. And the book started out with a really strong concept. She takes her kids away from her despot dictator husband, and they go on a run. And then as they're on the run, they get to situations where it's just like it became a whole bunch of action. Just like a lot of nonstop action. There wasn't really a whole lot of plot elements. And I'm like, okay, so this is a movie. So it's a very popcorny kind of movie. And then they finally find their refuge. And what's the twist? There's interactions between the different family members, and then all of a sudden you get to the final conflict, which happens in the last issue, and it doesn't go the way that you expect it. So there's your twist for your last. So I'm like, yep, nope, that is totally written to be an hour and 45 minutes. And made into this movie, which I find, it was fun, but it's not what I would consider a standout story. It's not timeless. Like Hickman's run on the Fantastic Four is one of those things that's going to stand up. It's going to be probably one of the best, if not the best, Fantastic Four run in the history of comic books, just because of how everything was kind of tied together. If you look at like Jeff Lemire is writing some really standout stories. Like Old Man Logan is going to be one of the best books of the era for everything, and then Descender I think is going to be a great independent comic book. Black Hammer, if it gets more appreciation, I think that is basically an independent version of the Vision as far as like Tom King's story in Marvel regarding the Vision. I think that Black Hammer is the same kind of dissection of character, and I think that it's got the same kind of skill that's associated with it. And it's one of those things where Mark Millar is just not pulling out the stops. He's not that. It doesn't feel like he's that invested in telling a timeless story. He's more invested in telling multiple stories, and he's spreading out all his goodness over a few books at a time.
Gotcha. It's interesting because as you talk, with the movie analogies, you've got those really in-depth directors who may only put out a movie every 3 or 4 years and try to put out a cinematic, something that you're always going to remember. And then you've got and I don't mean to compare it to him in a negative way, but you've got a Michael Bay who's going to put out a big explosion movie all the time. Again, it's no negative towards Millar. I don't mean to make that comparison, but it's just two different directing styles.
It's just that I knew that you were going to say that. I was just like, that was telegraphed.
Yeah. Where you're at right now, that's what it feels like a little bit as far as where they're writing now. Now, that being said, I really do want to go back and check out Hickman's run on the Final Four and some of Millar's older stuff before really he got his popularity, because that will change you if you're starting to write for more of a cinematic audience and you've been successful at it, and maybe his tastes have changed and maybe he likes doing that now and focusing more on that spot. And if that's the case, more power to you. Do what you love, and that's where you're going to put your best product in that media format.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that means that basically right now we're kind of knocking Mark Millar down to number 4. And then between the two of us, we're probably putting a tie number 2 for Jonathan Hickman as well as Rick Remender. They're just like different versions of each other. They tell them, one's got a little bit more detail, one's got a little bit more edge, and they deal in topics both in very interesting ways, but nothing that necessarily kind of tops the versatility of Jeff Lemire, who writes a lot of different types. He writes action books, he writes drama books. There's a bit of romance elements in certain aspects. He's just got all the different kind of tools in the toolbox to come. And if you want him to write a book, he will write you one hell of a book, regardless of what kind of book it is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the for the 2 and 3 spot, like you said, I think if you want an in-depth, complex story, go see Hickman. If you want that 2 spot being somebody who's going to tell you a lot of fun story with a character that's going to have a lot of faults and you can really relate to, maybe you see Remender. It's going to be a little bit lighter, a little bit more parallel for following. Where Hickman's going to take you, from point A to point B, but you're going to be doing circles and triangles, and you're going to be following curves and loops.
Yeah, it's funny because Rick Remender, I think he posted a tweet the other day, and he's just like, sincerity is the hardest thing to write. It's way easier to write being flippant and sarcastic. And I was like, you know what? It's really hard to write somebody earnest. I can totally understand that.
I was reading an issue of Fear Agent the other day, and in fact, there's one scene where they go through a bathroom stall, and on the corner, and it's kind of hidden, but you can see the R and the I for Rick, and then the REM for his last name. It's like Rick Remender is a gender something. It's just funny. They added these little Easter eggs into this, making fun of himself. That kind of stuff to me is gold.
Yeah, no, that's great. And what's funny is we were just talking about this. I believe that a couple of these guys have new books or really prominent issues that are going to be coming out in February. So where do you want to start on that? Do you want to start on like a major title? Do you want to start on like Image? You want to start on Dark Horse? What are you thinking about for the February solicitations? Let's not go into too much detail. We don't want to get a little spoilery for people. But what are your where do you want to start for the solicitations for February? Books coming out that they should be watching out for.
I want to talk about an author that we've already talked about that's putting out a hit for one of the for DC. I want to talk about Greg Rucka's new story. Greg Rucka's got the Old Guard coming out. Old Guard #1. Leandro Fernandez is going to be doing the art on this. February 22nd. It's 40 pages. I am really excited to see what he's got planned there. I don't know how much of the solicitations you really want to go into as far as giving things away, but that's definitely on my pull list already for February.
Well, I think that we can kind of touch on it. It's like, evidently you're trapped in immortality. That's a fundamental. These are old soldiers who don't die, and yet they can't fade away. Like that's kind of like the tagline for the Old Guard, and I have to say that's one that I definitely picked up on too. Because of how he's been writing Wonder Woman, I was just really like, oh, Greg Rucka's writing this. That's pretty awesome. Let's talk about the Old Guard. That looks great.
As soon as I saw the name, I was like, new #1, Rucka, add it to my list. I don't even care what the solicitation really says because of what he's doing. It'd be like the same thing with the authors we all just talked about. Same thing. I'd add him to my list right away to pull and see, at least give him out the first arc.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Let's see. As far as Image is concerned, I didn't really have anything else that really stood out to me. What about you?
No, that was the one from Image that I'm really going to pick up on. I had a couple from DC, a couple from Marvel, a Valiant one, and I am interested in it. The first issue drops in January, and maybe it is Image. Curse Words #2 is coming out.
Oh, Curse Words is January.
Yeah, it's #1's in January. #2 is in February.
Charles Soule, yeah.
And I just want to briefly say, I heard him talking about it, and he basically said, hey, it's a wizard who shows up in New York and like Central Park, basically starts doing magic and starts getting paid for it. Mm-hmm. He starts to become an egomaniac. He loves the attention, and so he's willing to perform anywhere for any amount of money. And then there's a bunch of bad stuff going on around him, and the wizard's not quite as nice as you think he is.
Oh yeah, no, I saw like a few like preview pages in the previews catalog, and I was just like, oh yeah, this is totally for me. There's a guy that a gang member or something like that comes walking up to him and is just like, yeah man, I want to be indestructible, so he makes indestructible, and that was really funny like how that ended up. I was just like, oh yeah, Charles Soule, you got something strong coming along here, but that's January.
I just wanted to mention that, yeah, there'll be the issue 2 will be in February. I thought I could sneak that in there on you a little bit.
Oh no, that's totally fine. I'm down with it. Curse Words looks to be like a really fun book, and that's definitely going to make it into my 9 comics to watch for January of 2017. So what did you have from DC?
The big one dropping for DC is going to be, I think, Wildstorm.
Really?
Yeah, well, yeah, Wildstorm. I shouldn't say the big one because they've got quite a few coming out that are going to be bigger ones. But I mean, we're going to have a whole new universe here with the Wildstorm universe. So This is a Warren Ellis one. John Davis Hunt's going to be doing the art. This one's coming out February 15th. And it looks like it's going to be really interesting. They're going to reset the Wildstorm universe. They're bringing back some new iterations of Grifter, Voodoo, Engineer, Jenny Sparks. And it's going to be interesting to see exactly how they fit. At the New York Comic-Con, Jim Lee had said, at the end of the day, some of the characters are basically going to be in the DC universe, but not a lot. He said that basically Wildstorm is going to be the Wildstorm universe. So it was kind of cryptic in how this is going to fit and how these characters are all going to fit in there. But I'm interested to see where this one goes and what new universe we get, because it's Warren Ellis controlling everything. They're basically just giving him this universe and saying, go.
Yeah, no, that was the thing that caught my eye the most about the Wildstorm, because, you know, Wildstorm originally, like the Image imprint back in the day kind of stuff, and I was just like, oh, so what's he going to do with Jim Lee's stuff? And it seems like it's going to be more of like, hey, Jim Lee created this kind of world, created this kind of universe, but I'm just taking everything over. And Warren Ellis is a very interesting writer. You know, I don't have too much experience with what he does. You know, I've read a few of his books and stuff like that. Nothing that really stood out to me, but if they give him something that he can kind of make his own, that's already got some established characters, I'm really interested to see what that's all about. As far as like what I'm really excited for inside the DC solicits for February, it's Super Sons #1, because that is going to be probably one of the most fun books that you'll ever read. Probably in the same vein as Champions, just a touch younger. Because the interaction between John and Damian is just going to be stellar. And that's from Peter J. Tomasi, who is writing the Superman book right now. And then Jorge Jimenez, who's going to be... Actually, I think he's doing the art on the Superman annual that's coming out this Wednesday.
And Tomasi's killing it, like you know, as you know, on Superman. So to see what he's going to do with these characters and how he's going to work the two stories, maybe parallel at points, is going to be really cool to see.
Well, and the nice thing is that he's had the experience writing both of them. So he's written Jonathan in Superman, and then in Batman and Robin, he wrote Damian. And that means that this is going to be a whole hell of a lot of progression for both of those characters. So we had kind of like this little tangent run-on that we had before we started doing this podcast thing, where we were talking about how we could rewrite the DC and Marvel universes by having characters age. And, you know, get to an old Superman, get to, you know, have John take over the mantle of those things, go to Dick Grayson and then to Damian Wayne as Batman, while these characters get older and they become a little bit more like mentor, establishee kind of people versus the main characters. And that's how you make the characters a symbol, not necessarily Bruce Wayne is a symbol, but Batman is a symbol that can be a mantle that's passed forward. And while I doubt that's going to happen, I like the fact that these books are going to give people the possibility, you know, if that ever becomes a decision that they want to make, I think that that's going to be really great. You've also got Batwoman, which is coming out of the pages of Detective, which is arguably the strongest Batman book out of everything. I mean, I really like Tom King's run, but I think James Tynion IV is just crushing it as far as the team book's concerned, and he's writing Batwoman phenomenally.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's, I mean, I don't think you can argue one way or the other with those Batman titles. Some of them are really, the writing's so good. And she was a hit in New 52, took off as a character. I'm interested to see where this one's going to go with the #1 dropping.
Is there anything out of the DC solicits that you find might be a bit, alarming, or something that you're kind of worried about?
I'm going to pick it up because I'm a sucker, and I'm still picking up Justice League for whatever reason. Don't ask me why.
I won't.
I shouldn't be, but I am. I just want to get through the crossover event next month and into January and be done with that book. But the JLA, Justice League of America, I'm going to pick it up. I'm not as sold on the characters. I can't. Was that Orlando?
Yeah, it's Orlando.
Yeah, and that's another thing that kind of concerns me a little bit. So that's one that, you know, I'll pick it up and I'll give it a shot, but I'm going to have a quick trigger with it, unlike Hitch on the current Justice League.
It's funny because I remember when we were originally talking about JLA, and it seemed like it was going to be really exciting because, you know, you've got all the JLA stuff dropping in January with the Ray and Killer Frost and all those kind of single-shot issues, and it seemed like it was going to be really good. And then they released the photo with Lobo, Black Canary, and Batman, and then there was the interview that said that JLA was going to be the, you know, like the main title for DC Rebirth, and we're like, okay, I'm less excited now.
Yeah, we both were that way, because it's like, wait a second, you're going to have, you know, and I hate to use B level characters, but you're going to have some of the B level characters involved in the major story going on in the Rebirth. This should be, and this is where the JLA and Justice League, in my opinion, if they're going to keep the writing where they're at, you know, kind of leave them off the table. Make Trinity your flagship book, and make Trinity where all the Rebirth stuff takes place. Let's let that, because that is so good. Get rid of Justice League, see how Justice League America plays out, but make Trinity where everything goes, because it's such a good title.
Well, and what's funny is because, there were some Easter eggs in Titans to begin with regarding DC Rebirth, and the thing that I liked about DC Rebirth so much was that different aspects of DC Rebirth can show up in any book. So, you've got Mr. Oz that's currently lurking around Action Comics and Superman, but we haven't really seen him in a little while. In Batman, you saw that throwback to Saturn Girl in Batman #9 inside Arkham. So that's really cool. She's like, yeah, Legion, don't you know me? And Batman's like, no, I don't know shit about you. So you've got that, and then in Titans, you've got Wally West and Kadabra, who are kind of battling in that respect. But there's the Watchmen Watch showed up in there. There's a lot of really cool Easter eggs that are kind of, and then Flash. In the Flash, there's some real throwbacks to that too. And then in Flash Rebirth, you had him going to Bruce where you'd found the pin. So everybody's kind of got these ideas about what everything's doing in DC Rebirth, and I like the fact that it's spread out. It gives you a lot more reason to read a bunch of different stuff. So that way you can kind of keep up with those aspects. So if you kind of start funneling everything into one individual book, I don't think that that's a really good idea. So if anything like that happens, I'd be a little bit disappointed, and I think that DC Rebirth is already doing a really good job as carrying that overall arc forward a little bit and just teasing here and there. Because Detective, the disappearance/death of Tim Drake was one of the that was one of the best books out of DC Rebirth. That whole setup and character-driven arc that Tynion put together, and that's a direct tie-in. So that means that I just named off 6 books that have different ties to DC Rebirth. So that would be, it'd be a shame to kind of take away that ability of other writers to work those things in.
Yeah, we didn't even, you didn't mention either, we talked about earlier about what Wonder Woman could be.
Oh, yeah,
this
absolutely.
whole line thing idea, you can tie that in as well. So you're right, you can see this in a bunch of them. I think they're going to need, obviously 1, 2, 3 titles that are really going to drive that story forward. And I'm really disappointed, like you mentioned, that JLA may be the one that they're going to use for it just because of the character selection.
Yeah. So let's not talk about disappointing things. Let's go talk about Marvel. Is there anything in Marvel that caught your eye for February?
There are there's actually 5 books in Marvel. We've talked about 3 of them: Kingpin, Elektra, and Bullseye. Bullseye's obviously the mini run. It's going to be, I think, 4 or 5 issues, but they're all going to tie into what he's calling Running with the Devil. So they're going to be in the Daredevil's universe. I'm really excited to see what he's going to do with that. I didn't read it, but I know you love the Civil War II tie-in with Kingpin.
I think
I'm actually going to go back.
Yeah, no, that was one of the best books to come out, and it's so they paid lip service to the overall Kingpin to Civil War II, and then it was really about Kingpin and Kingpin's mentality. So he wrote Kingpin as a character, and it really involved how he was very resilient, how he was resourceful, and then ultimately there was this brutal sense of vengeance and superiority. There was a whole lot of arrogance, and that was one of the fun things about how Matthew Rosenberg wrote that. I was really taken by 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank, which was a really fun take. I mean, it opened up with Dungeons & Dragons, and it's about how, this little girl is the badass leader of this group of, 12-year-old kids, and they're going to help her dad, I think there's a bank heist or something like that. It's been delayed because he's been doing so much other stuff, but it was just a really cool, irreverent take on that whole aspect. And then when he hopped into Civil War II, I was just like, yeah, you know what, I'll pick it up to see what it's all about. And then just the way that he wrote Kingpin is just this giant ball of arrogance and ambition. I was just like, yeah, that's what I want a Kingpin to feel like. I want him to feel like he's better than everybody. I want him to know that he's better than everybody, and I want him to approach these kind of things in a very cold, calculating, and strategic manner to facilitate his success. And I'm just like, yep, I'm on board for the whole thing. And it didn't disappoint. The art is a little odd because Ricardo Lopez Ortiz, he's got a very scratchy, edgy kind of feel, very disproportionate, very stylized, but it suited the gritty world that they were in. So I was really excited about that.
Well, that's cool because then you got like we talked about with Super Sons. You've got that same voice carrying over. You're going to have the same character development because you've already got somebody that's laid the foundation, and I really like that.
Yeah, no, that's going to be awesome. So, I mean, Civil War II Kingpin, if you're going to be interested in Kingpin #1 in February, definitely go back and read Civil War II Kingpin 1 through 4. It's only a 4-part mini, and it's actually just came out in trade. So I think I might actually do a video, kind of review summary for that whole series.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah, just to kind of get everybody up to speed on that. So what are the other ones that you're looking at from Marvel?
So I'll give you one that I'm actually excited for and one that I'm not sure if I'm excited for. I don't normally pull these titles because I'm not big into some of the fantasy stuff. This isn't fantasy, it's more sci-fi. But it does interest me. Darth Maul #1.
That one's kind of, it's like, yeah, I can see that. I can
I
totally
don't
see
pull
that.
any other. I mean, the last Star Wars comics I have are from when I was a little kid.
Mhm.
I'm not really big into any of the Star Wars stuff anymore. I go see the movies. I enjoy them. I don't really follow. I follow the movies, and that's about it. I didn't pick up any of Marvel's Star Wars run. But this one's intriguing. I like the fact that it's going to be 5 issues. It's going to be a short run that I can jump on, not feel like I'm going to be stuck in a big, long story with it. And maybe it will eventually develop if it's good enough.
Mhm.
But this one's got me intrigued.
No, I totally agree with that, and I think that Darth Vader sets a really good precedent for that, so that way they can tell a very self-contained story. So if they come in with an idea and they execute on the idea, that's fantastic. And if they have the restraint to kind of limit it to just that, that's going to be what's going to be the mark of something. Because there are a lot of books that start off with really strong first arcs and then a really good second arc, and then they're like, oh, well, those were the ideas that we had. And then they've got to kind of go someplace else. But yeah, Darth Maul, that's a really cool kind of pick.
The one I'm kind of nervous about, and it's not a #1, it's actually a #5, is Champions with Gwenpool. Yeah, exactly. And I think part of it's just because of some of the crossover stuff or some of the interactions I've seen and some of the DC stuff. Granted, this is Marvel. I'm nervous about them bringing in and kind of maybe interrupting a flow that they got going. I would like them to build champions as they are right now. That being said, who knows where it's going to go? This is all just kind of a future prediction that we're looking at. It could be great, but my initial thoughts are just let champions develop and be champions for a while.
Well, what's funny is that the actual solicit for Champions #5 says, oh, great, just when the champions had a nice little movement going on, here comes Gwenpool to improve it all with her patented brand of consequenceless violence and disregard for human life. So I feel like Mark Waid is going to do a commentary on Gwenpool as a character, and that could be really fun. So, I mean, that's a 50-50 book, because it could be a really well-executed story and a commentary on this character, her perceived popularity, and, how she acts, versus, what he really wants to write her like, which could be really not necessarily nice for her.
That's interesting. As I finished my sentences, I was like, well, it's Wade and what he's already done with Champions. He's got kid gloves on. He's doing such a good job with them that I should just give him a chance before I badmouth it. But it was one of those where I went, oh, really? But like you said, if he does a good commentary on it, he can do a really good book. So I may be kicking myself and apologizing to all the listeners come February and March.
Oh yeah, no, I totally get that. So I mean, Champions was a pick of mine. I was really looking forward to Kingpin, and then ultimately, I really now I'm more excited for the Daredevil run that you were talking about. As it was I was just going to pick it up as a standalone, but now that that's kind of going on, I'm definitely going to pick up Daredevil there. The other thing that I'm really excited for is the Clone Conspiracy #5. Because that is both the end, primarily because it's the end of the Clone Conspiracy. Not that I have any problem with the Clone Conspiracy, it's just that the Clone Conspiracy is doing all this stuff. And I want to see it get to the conclusion, because this feels like a story arc that you're gonna feel a lot better if you read it all to once. If you don't read it in individual chunks, it feels like it's just gonna be better kind of compacted and put together. And that's what I'm really waiting for, because I'm reading all the tie-ins, and I actually just shot another review for Prowler #2, because I'm going to review every single Clone Conspiracy tie-in and just have a big playlist full of that stuff. And there was just nothing that went on in that. I mean, you saw the return of Julia Carpenter, who was a Spider-Woman back in the day. She became like the second Madame Web, and yeah, no, it just was not nice.
It's going to be cool. It's going to be the shortest review ever on Detail Comics.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those things where I still don't. I feel like they're not doing enough justice to Hobie Brown as a character. They're not giving him enough to do. They're just making him basically be the brunt of everybody's. I wouldn't say jokes, but he's like a punching bag. He ended up the first issue, he was just like a glorified security guard, and then he got taken out by Julia Carpenter, that we find out in issue #2, and then Electro's going to kind of come and kick his ass after. I'm not going to spoil anything, because you're probably not going to read it anyway. And now
I'm going to watch your videos.
Yeah, and now he's got this carrion disease, which was revealed in Amazing Spider-Man 21, and it was just like, okay, so he forgot to take his medication. So Hobie Brown is having a really rough time with this Clone Conspiracy thing, and it's just like, okay, you could have done without this entire book. So I can't wait to see that kind of see where the whole Spider-Man tower, where it crumbles down into, and what we've got left after in the rubble. So that's going to be one of the ones that I'm looking out for.
That's okay. Is that it for Marvel for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really strong books that are going to continue kind of going on. Like Amazing Spider-Man: Renew Your Vows is going to be a really strong book. I really like where Spider-Man's going, but the unfortunate thing about that one is that it's the crossover with Miles Morales, so they've got that kind of romance thing going. It looks like Ultimates #2 Ultimate Squared is going to have issue #4, so we're like, okay, more super awesome cosmic stuff. And then what's going on with Doctor Doom as Iron Man? What's going on with Riri as the Invincible Iron Man? Those are all things that are really interesting. Plus, you're getting towards the end of that final, arc of Unworthy Thor, which is probably one of the better books. You've got the Asgard Shi'ar War, which is going on in Mighty Thor. There's so much good stuff going on, but there's just not a lot of new stuff going on.
Yeah, not a lot of new, and it's the same thing with me. Power Man and Iron Fist. There's continuing issues. Moon Knight. Lemire had said that basically, it sounds like he's getting a lot of people asking him like, where are we going with Mark Spector? This is kind of a confusing story. Lemire had come out and said, just hold your horses. I've got a plan. And with me being a Lemire fanboy, I was like, all right, I'm satisfied. I know where he's going to. Something's good's going to happen. He has a plan to wrap this all up. So I'm hoping that may start in February as well.
Oh yeah, I mean it's. I think it's like issue 10 or something like that. It's coming out in January, and that is a little bit more backstory on Mark Spector, like how everything kind of started. So if that's where everything's.
Yeah, the last issue ended great.
Oh yeah, no, that was great. Like the whole unification, like all the
those
different
3 doors all
Oh
open.
my god, it was just like, yeah, and that means that Greg Smallwood's doing more of the art because I have no bones to pick with any of the artists that are working on that book because they all draw their individual characters really well. It's just that Greg Smallwood has lent such a great sense of texture to that whole New Egypt, New York kind of thing. I was just like, oh my god, that you could feel the sand on your skin. Like the bandage on Mark Spector's nose, it had it had grit on it. I was just like, oh yeah, this is my jam. This is great. So I love Moon Knight. I love what they're doing with it. I can't wait to see what he's got in store because I have a feeling everybody's going to eventually go, oh shit, that was a killer run. Why wasn't I following it from the beginning? Oh, absolutely. I think that's going to be something strong for everybody. So now that we've kind of, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on? Yeah.
Yeah, I got 2 other ones. I'm not going to touch on them for very long. Valiant's got Shadow Man and the Battle of New Stalingrad coming out. Okay. #1, and that's going to be tied into their Divinity 3 series, which drops next month in December.
Stalinverse.
Stalinverse and Comrade Bloodshot. Their mini series. So I'm looking forward to that. Like I said, I'm a big Valiant fan. And there's one other one, and I would never have thought I would want to pull this, but it's going on my pull list because the artwork looks incredible. Boom Studios has Planet of the Apes, Green Lantern, 1 of 6 dropping in February.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing that.
I do not pull Green Lantern right now. Everybody tells me I should, but I've just got too many books to keep up with. But I saw the artwork for the Planet of the Apes, Green Lantern, and I was like, that looks super cool, man. I am going to grab that. I don't know a whole lot about what's going on in it, but it's a mini-series. Again, it's like Darth Maul. I can jump in, get 6 issues. If the art's great, who cares about the rest of the story for me? Because the what they've released right now is just gorgeous.
Well, yeah, no. So I mean, it looks like as far as the artist, it's Barnaby Bagenda. There's a couple covers from a few different people, and it's not necessarily going to be tying into anything in current continuity. It's going to be kind of like a one-shot series that's going to be touching on Planet of the Apes and Green Lantern. So you don't really need to follow along. Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps is really good. When it's dealing with Hal Jordan, once it gets away from Hal Jordan, it feels a little bit frustrating. I'm not as invested in like Kilowog and Jon Stewart and all those kind of guys that make up the rest of the Corps. And then Green Lanterns is a very good earthly personal tale. I just finally warmed up to Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz, and they just introduced the Phantom Ring, which is like the most powerful ring. It's got no limiters on it. You can access any part of the emotional spectrum. You don't have to be Kyle Rayner to use this and understand your emotions. You can be anybody. So if you have some sort of like pulse of fear in you, all of a sudden you're a Red Lantern and you're powered up, and it's,
oh wow,
yeah. So that's a really cool arc that's going on. But for an interesting book, definitely Green Lantern and the Planet of the Apes. That's not one that I was thinking about.
Don't they show some pictures of like the Planet of the Apes guys with the Green Lantern ring, like they're powered up? And I was like, wow, some of the artwork looks great. I'm like, what's going to happen with these apes with these powers now? I don't know. Like I said, I don't normally pull anything like this, but the art hooked me. I'm just like, that looks awesome. I'm going to try it.
Oh yeah, no, there's these really cool there's a really cool homage cover that's got Sinestro in the background, and it's got a giant green lantern like where the Statue of Liberty's torch would be. There's another one that looks like one of the apes against an Icarus capsule that's yellow, so it's a real throwback to the original Green Lantern cover. Another one that looks like Alex Ross with with one of the apes like in that Hal Jordan pose out in front. I mean, it looks to be like a really fun kind of issue. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, you got me on that one. I can't help it. That's going to be fun. I got to pick up at least issue number 1.
Yeah, I got to give it a shot too.
Cool. So that kind of wraps up everything that we had really planned for today. So this has been the first issue of the Detail. Well, first issue. I should call it first episode, right? The first episode of the Detail Comics podcast. So I'm Stan from Detail Comics, and then I've got Blackpool over here. And this is hopefully going to be a little bit more regular thing, once a month, once every couple of weeks. We're not really sure on the schedule, but depending on the reception, it's going to be pretty awesome. So anything you want to say in closing, Blackpool?
No, I just want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank you for the discussion today, Stan. I love talking comics, so just to get together for an hour and a half and shoot the shit basically with you about comics. I'm excited for a bunch of new titles. I've learned a bunch of new things, so I had a really good time. Thank you for hosting. Oh
yeah, no, this has been super fun, and I hope that we get a good reception so that way we can keep doing it. I would really love to set something like this up. This is a whole lot of fun. A lot of things that I wouldn't really think to pick up. A lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily think about as far as perspective. It's always great to get fresh eyes on different stuff. So thanks for listening, everybody, and I hope you tune in for next episode.